Dante Russo, Kieran Blake, and Milo Turner ruled Manchester's streets with fear, cunning, and brutality. But when loyalty cracked and betrayal lurked in every shadow, their empire of crime spiraled toward a shocking and violent downfall. Please subscribe for daily new gang crime story and watch till end. In the heart of Manchester, a young man named Dante Russo walked the thin line between ambition and danger. He grew up in the rough neighborhoods of the city, where violence and poverty were as common as the rain that constantly drizzled over the streets. From an early age, Dante realized that survival meant more than just avoiding trouble, it meant controlling it. He started small, running errands for petty criminals, delivering stolen goods, and learning the subtle art of intimidation. Each successful hustle built his confidence, and soon, whispers of his cunning and fearlessness began circulating among the local gangs. By the time Dante was in his early 20s, he had gathered a circle of friends who shared his hunger for power. Kieran Blake, sharp-minded and quick on his feet, had an uncanny ability to read people, while Milo Turner, tough and silent, could handle any confrontation that came their way. Together, they formed a tight-knit alliance, one built on loyalty and mutual ambition. They called themselves the Dominion Crew, though the name was known only in whispers at first. Their influence began quietly, as if the city itself did not notice the subtle changes taking place. The crew's early operations were simple but effective. They started with car thefts, petty robberies, and small-scale protection rackets, but Dante had a vision that extended far beyond local crimes. He wanted an empire, one that would make even the most feared gangs in the UK think twice before challenging them. Every move was calculated. Dante kept careful records of who owed what, who could be trusted, and who would be eliminated without hesitation. Underneath the night sky, he would walk through the darkened alleys, imagining the network of power he was slowly constructing. Word of Dante and his crew spread fast. Local shopkeepers who refused to pay protection fees found their windows smashed or deliveries stolen. Rival gangs who underestimated them were quickly reminded of the price of disrespect. But Dante understood that raw violence alone could not sustain an empire. He began manipulating alliances, offering loyalty and intimidation in equal measure. Kieran's strategic mind and Milo's muscle allowed the crew to handle both the brains and the brawn of their operations. Despite their growing notoriety, the Dominion Crew maintained a careful balance between fear and invisibility. Dante rented a modest house in a quiet suburb, appearing as an ordinary young man. Milo ran a small car repair shop that served as a front for meetings and exchanges, and Kieran attended community events, masking the darkness that simmered beneath his polite exterior. The public saw only the surface, unaware of the meticulous planning, the hidden weapons, and the network of informants that extended across Manchester. It was in these early years that the foundations of the empire were set. Every theft, every threat, every whispered warning to a rival gang strengthened Dante's hold on the streets. The crew's reputation for ruthless efficiency and unwavering loyalty began to take shape, sending a clear message. Betrayal or weakness would be punished swiftly, and no one, not the police, not rival gangs, not even friends, was untouchable. In the shadows of the city, a deadly empire was quietly being born, one that would grow to dominate the criminal underworld and capture the attention of the entire UK. By 2015, the Dominion Crew had grown from a small group of street hustlers into a powerful and invisible force controlling much of Manchester's underground economy. Dante Russo had transformed from a clever, ambitious youth into a calculating leader whose reputation spread far beyond the city. The crew's operations were no longer simple thefts or petty scams. They had evolved into organized drug trafficking, smuggling, and extortion that stretched across the north of England. Each member had a role, and each operation was planned with precision, leaving little room for mistakes. Dante's intelligence and Kieran Blake's strategic mind made them nearly untouchable, while Milo Turner's brute strength ensured that threats were dealt with swiftly. The crew operated in the shadows, hiding their growing empire behind legitimate fronts. Milo's car repair shop became more than a cover. It was a hub for secret meetings and exchanges. Kieran attended charity events and local community gatherings, appearing as a polite and reliable young man, while Dante rented a modest but stylish home in the suburbs, hosting dinners that seemed ordinary to the neighbors, but were carefully orchestrated gatherings to discuss business and loyalty. Everything was a show designed to make the crew invisible to law enforcement, while simultaneously expanding their influence over rival gangs and local businesses. Tensions, however, were never far away. Rival gangs watched Dante's rise with growing envy and fear. One such gang, led by the ruthless Saxon Reed, saw an opportunity to challenge the crew's dominance. Saxon was violent, unpredictable, and used fear as a weapon, but he underestimated Dante's patience and cunning. When Saxon's gang attempted to seize control of a key territory in Manchester, Dante devised a plan that was both daring and cruel. Under the cover of darkness, he orchestrated a counterattack that left Saxon's men disoriented and terrified. By the time the sun rose, the message was clear. The Dominion crew could not be crossed, and betrayal or aggression against them would be met with swift, brutal retaliation. The victory over Saxon's gang cemented the crew's dominance, but it also revealed the fragile nature of power. Each member had to understand that survival depended on obedience, loyalty, and a willingness to act without hesitation. Dante's leadership style was unforgiving. Mistakes were punished, disloyalty ended in violence, and hesitation could be fatal. Yet, in the shadows, the crew continued to expand, making alliances with other criminal networks, infiltrating local businesses, and moving vast quantities of drugs across city borders. Despite their growing empire, the crew maintained an illusion of normality. Neighbors saw Dante walking his dog or Milo fixing a car, unaware that these ordinary acts masked a web of terror and control. Kieran's calm demeanor at charity events concealed his knowledge of black market dealings, threats, and clandestine meetings. Every action, every step, was calculated to ensure the crew's continued dominance while avoiding detection. The Dominion crew had become a silent, omnipresent force, feared by rivals and envied by criminals, yet invisible to the authorities. Manchester had become their playground, and the empire they were building seemed untouchable. But even the most carefully constructed empire has cracks, and power, as Dante would soon learn, brings enemies both outside and within. As the Dominion crew's power grew, the circle of trust around Dante Russo became both more valuable and more fragile. The empire thrived on fear and loyalty, but ambition is a dangerous seed, and it began to sprout within the ranks. A new figure emerged in the shadows, Jace Holloway, a former soldier with a reputation for brutality and cunning. He quickly impressed Dante with his efficiency and strategic thinking, earning the position of second in command. Jace's loyalty seemed unquestionable at first, and the crew welcomed his expertise as they expanded into larger, riskier operations. Yet beneath his calm exterior, a hunger for dominance simmered. The first signs of tension appeared subtly. Cash shipments went missing, and high-stakes deals started to unravel without clear explanation. Dante, observant and calculating, noticed Jace's presence in the wrong places at the wrong times, and the way he subtly manipulated situations to his advantage. Kieran and Milo remained loyal, but even their loyalty could not shield the crew from the creeping suspicion that something was amiss. Dante, always wary of betrayal, began to watch Jace closely, planting traps to test his allegiances. The crew's empire, once a well-oiled machine, now faced internal instability. Rival gangs sensed the change and attempted minor provocations, hoping to exploit the cracks in Dante's leadership. But Dante remained several steps ahead, using deception and carefully orchestrated intimidation to to maintain control. It was during a major drug exchange in Liverpool that the true test came. The shipment was a critical one, involving both high-value narcotics and a significant sum of money, and Dante suspected that Chase might make his move. On the night of the exchange, the streets were slick with rain, reflecting the dim lights of the city. Dante's trap was set with precision, every exit monitored, every potential ally accounted for, and every moment timed to reveal betrayal. Chase, confident in his perceived cunning, made his attempt to seize control, only to be caught in the intricate web Dante had spun. The confrontation was swift and brutal. There was no mercy for those who defied the crew's hierarchy. By morning, Chase's fate was sealed, a stark warning to anyone considering treachery. The incident sent ripples through the criminal underworld. Stories spread of Dante's cold, precise handling of betrayal, reinforcing the Dominion crew's reputation for ruthless enforcement of loyalty. Members understood that even someone as skilled and dangerous as Jace Holloway could be eliminated without hesitation. Fear became the invisible glue that held the crew together, binding them with the understanding that loyalty was absolute and any deviation could be fatal. In the aftermath, Dante's empire seemed stronger than ever, yet a seed of paranoia had been planted. He realized that even those closest to him could become threats if ambition outweighed loyalty. The experience hardened him, sharpening his instincts and forcing him to take an even tighter grip on the crew. The streets of Manchester, already under the Dominion crew's shadow, became a stage where power, fear, and betrayal intersected, and Dante knew that survival required constant vigilance. Even as their empire thrived, the question lingered. Who could be trusted when ambition could turn friend into enemy in the blink of an eye? The Dominion crew had grown powerful, their influence stretching across Manchester and beyond. Yet with every empire comes attention, and theirs had not gone unnoticed. Scotland Yard had been aware of Dante Russo and his operations for years, but he was a ghost, always careful, always 3 steps ahead. Detectives struggled to gather evidence. Witnesses feared retaliation, and informants disappeared mysteriously. It was as if Dante had built an invisible fortress around his crew, one that the law could see but not penetrate. That changed when Detective Inspector Amelia Hart took charge of the investigation. Amelia was relentless, a woman with a reputation for meticulous attention to detail and a refusal to back down from cases others considered too dangerous. She studied the crew for months, observing patterns, analyzing movements, and slowly piecing together the network Dante had created. Every transaction, every exchange, every meeting was mapped, and the cracks in the crew's carefully constructed operations began to show. She understood that brute force alone would not take them down. Patience, precision, and infiltration were required. Amelia began by identifying small-time associates, people on the fringes who had knowledge of the crew, but little loyalty to Dante. Using covert surveillance, secret recordings, and carefully cultivated informants, she built a dossier that revealed the extent of the crew's influence. Safe houses, drug routes, and financial trails all were mapped in painstaking detail. Dante's empire, which had seemed untouchable, was slowly becoming exposed. Meanwhile, paranoia began to creep into the Dominion crew. Small mistakes that Dante had previously dismissed as inconsequential were suddenly dangerous. A delayed payment, a missed meeting, an unfamiliar face near a warehouse, all triggered suspicion and fear. Dante's instinct told him something was wrong, but he could not pinpoint the source. Kieran and Milo noticed the subtle changes in Dante's behavior. The crew's once unshakable confidence was being eroded from the shadows. Amelia's tactics were silent but effective. She used surveillance cameras, tracked communications, and infiltrated low-level operations. Each intercepted message, each observed exchange, brought her closer to the core of the empire. She understood that to capture Dante, she had to be patient, waiting for the perfect moment when the crew's overconfidence would create a vulnerability. Small raids on minor members disrupted operations and sowed distrust among the ranks, causing panic and uncertainty within the crew. By 2017, the Dominion crew was operating under a cloud of tension they could not fully understand. Dante's control was slipping, though he would never admit it openly. Even the most loyal members began to question decisions, fearing hidden traps and betrayal. Amelia's investigation was like a silent predator, invisible but ever-present, moving closer with each calculated step. The crew's world of crime, once dominated by certainty and power, was now overshadowed by fear of the unknown. The empire that had seemed invincible was facing an adversary who could not be intimidated, bribed, or threatened. And in this battle of wits, only one side could emerge victorious. By 2018, cracks had begun to form in the Dominion crew. Years of power, violence, and calculated dominance had created an empire, but ambition and fear were slowly eroding the bonds that held it together. Dante Russo, once confident and untouchable, felt the subtle tremors of distrust among his closest allies. Kieran Blake, his childhood friend and strategic partner, had begun to question the morality of their actions. The constant violence, the betrayals, and the growing threat from law enforcement weighed heavily on him. He wanted out, but leaving such a world was never simple. To exit meant risking everything, and in Dante's empire, hesitation was dangerous. Meanwhile, rival gangs, emboldened by rumors of internal instability, began testing the crew's defenses. Skirmishes erupted on the outskirts of Manchester as minor territories were attacked, warehouses were sabotaged, and shipments intercepted. Each strike was a reminder that power is fleeting, and dominance depends not only on strength, but on vigilance and unity. The crew responded with measured retaliation, but the energy and confidence that had once defined them were no longer the same. Fear had begun to creep in, a quiet but persistent shadow that changed behavior, slowed decisions, and created tension where loyalty had once been absolute. The pressure intensified when Kieran secretly began cooperating with law enforcement. He knew that Dante would never forgive betrayal, yet he felt trapped between loyalty and survival. Every decision became a calculated risk, every meeting fraught with danger, and every glance over the shoulder a reminder that the empire they had built could collapse from within. Dante's once impenetrable web of control began to fray, and paranoia spread like wildfire. He scrutinized every member, every transaction, and every minor mistake, but even his instincts could not pinpoint the growing threat lurking inside the crew. At the same time, the outside world continued to challenge them. Smaller gangs attempted to reclaim territories that had once been lost, striking at opportune moments. These attacks, though not overwhelmingly powerful, created chaos that exposed vulnerabilities in the crew's operations. Members began second-guessing each other, alliances were questioned, and trust became a scarce commodity. The streets of Manchester, once ruled by Dante's calculated dominance, had become a battlefield not only against rivals, but also against fear itself. Dante, hardened by years of success, realized that the empire's downfall was not coming from law enforcement alone, nor from rival gangs. It was coming from within. The crew he had trusted, nurtured, and relied upon was beginning to crumble under the pressure of loyalty, tested by fear, ambition, and self-preservation. He tried to maintain control through intimidation and reminders of past violence, but the subtle discontent was spreading too quickly to stop. The Dominion crew, once a symbol of power and terror, was now fragile, vulnerable, and teetering on the edge of collapse. As the tension reached its peak, Dante understood that the final confrontation with law enforcement, rival gangs, and internal betrayal was inevitable. The empire he had built with meticulous care was unraveling, and he could feel the walls closing in. Every ally was a potential enemy, every shadow a threat, and every decision could be the one that led to the ultimate downfall. The stage was set for the final chapter, where power, fear, and betrayal would collide with deadly consequences. And the empire that had once ruled Manchester would face the reality it could not escape. The final chapter of the Dominion crew unfolded under a stormy sky, the dark clouds mirroring the chaos that had consumed Dante Russo's empire. Years of meticulous planning, ruthless enforcement, and cunning had brought the crew to the height of power, but every empire has its end. Detective Inspector Amelia Hart had been patient, observing, tracking, and infiltrating for months, waiting for the precise moment when the crew's overconfidence and fractures would make them vulnerable. That night, every element of her plan came together. The crew had gathered at an abandoned warehouse outside Manchester, one of their largest distribution points. Dante, ever confident in his control, had not anticipated the precision of the law enforcement operation. The streets surrounding the building were cordoned off, and undercover officers had infiltrated key positions inside. Every exit, every hiding place, every potential escape route was monitored. The tension within the crew was palpable. Fear had already begun to erode their cohesion, and small signs of doubt were visible on even the most hardened members. Dante sensed that something was off, but his instincts could not identify the danger. Kieran, now secretly cooperating with the authorities, moved cautiously, ensuring he stayed close enough to protect himself while feeding critical information to Amelia. Milo Turner, ever loyal but increasingly weary, noticed the strange behavior of some members, realizing that not all were fully committed to Dante's orders. The sense of impending doom was undeniable, yet pride and habit kept the crew together in the building. As the storm raged outside, Amelia and her team moved in with precision. A sudden perimeter breach cut off all escape, and officers quietly secured entrances. The crew realized too late that their empire had been mapped, tracked, and infiltrated to perfection. Panic erupted inside the warehouse. Members attempted to flee, but the carefully coordinated operation left no room for evasion. Weapons were surrendered, cash and drugs were seized, and the chaos that had once defined their operations became their undoing. Dante tried a desperate escape, darting toward a side exit, but exhaustion, paranoia, and the sheer pressure of years of violence slowed his movements. Officers cornered him, and for the first time, the fear he had instilled in others consumed him. The man who had once ruled the streets of Manchester with an iron fist was captured, shackled, and led away, his empire collapsing around him. Every member of the crew faced arrest, imprisonment, or in some cases, violent retribution from rival gangs emboldened by their downfall. In the aftermath, media outlets broadcast the story as the fall of America's most dangerous crew operating in the UK, shocking the public who had scarcely imagined such a deadly network thriving in their midst. The warehouse, once a symbol of power and control, now stood empty, a testament to ambition undone by loyalty tested, fear exploited, and law enforcement's relentless strategy. Dante's legacy remained, not as a triumphant kingpin, but as a cautionary tale. Even the most feared empire is vulnerable to betrayal, investigation, and the relentless march of justice. The streets of Manchester slowly returned to normal, yet the memory of the Dominion crew lingered, a shadow over the city, and a reminder that power built on fear can be just as fragile as it is dangerous.